Hey guys, how's it going? Brian from Boas here. I've been getting a lot of questions lately from people that are concerned about the size of their boas, and I always see lots of posts on the social media pages about people with boas and they think they're either growing too fast or too slow. And some people get really obsessed with this. You know, they want to know exactly where their boa should be. So what I'm going to do today is show you some examples of 2-year-old boas of different types. We're going to weigh them. You can see the sizes just so you have some idea what to expect for growth on a 2-year-old boa. And in general, you don't need to be obsessed with the size of your boa. Every boa is different. They all grow at a little bit different of a rate, and you don't need to be concerned with the exact rate that it's growing. In fact, I think people just get really obsessed about this and they see pictures online. Maybe someone's got a 2-year-old boa that they claim is like 7 feet, or someone else has one that fits like 1.5 feet. But in general, just ignore all these things, take these things with a grain of salt. It all comes down to common sense. You want your boa to grow slowly but steadily, okay? And by that, for most locality boas, they're gonna put on anywhere from about 6 inches to about 1.5 feet per year. In fact, the types I'm going to show you today all have different sizes. This is actually probably the largest 2-year-old animal I'm going to show you. It's a Barranquilla Colombia boa. This is a boa imperator. And in general, the boa imperator and the morph boas grow faster than the true redtails. In fact, even if you give them the same feeding regimen, they still grow quite a bit faster. And you'll see how much larger this animal is compared to some of my Suriname true redtails that are 2 years old. And so I've talked a lot in my videos about feeding rates and how much you should feed your boa. Just to reiterate, in general, you want to feed young boas between 0 years old up to about 2 years old about every 10 to 14 days. And then you want to probably go to about once a week from age 2 to around age 4. And then when they hit around age 4, they're starting to get that adult size and shape. You maybe want to back off to about every 3 weeks or so. But these are just rules of thumb, okay? Basically, you want to adjust the food intake so your boa has this muscular look, and it's a very firm looking animal, very muscular, without being fatty. But you don't really want to see the ribs either, and you want this steady growth. So if your boa isn't growing at all, you're probably not feeding it enough. If your boa is like 5 feet long at age 1, maybe you're feeding it a little bit too much. And so we've all heard about power feeding, where people feed boas huge amounts just so they can try to get them up to breeding size in as little as 1.5 years or 2 years, something like that. Which of course it really isn't good, and it leads to a greatly shortened lifespan. And ultimately not very good breeders either. But I think because people are so concerned about power feeding, a lot of people have gone to the opposite, where they barely feed the animals at all in an effort to slow grow them. And I've heard about people feeding newborn and 1-year-old boas as infrequently as every 6 weeks. And let me tell you, you're just slowly starving your boa. If you're feeding a boa every 6 weeks, it's probably going to barely squeak by. So you definitely don't want to do that either. Again, watch your boa, feed it so that it has slow, steady growth, anywhere from 6 inches to about 18 inches a year. So ignore all the hype out there about feeding your boa and just go with your common sense. Watch your boa so that it has slow, steady growth. So I'm going to do a weigh-in today. So you can see this female Barranquilla Colombia boa that's about 2 years old is probably about 4 feet long, maybe a little bit more. And I'm just going to do a weigh-in. I have a pretty simple equipment here. I've got this kitchen scale that I absconded from my wife, and she bought it for dietary purposes. It works great for weighing out salads and spices and things like that. Also works great for weighing out crack cocaine or methamphetamine, but I would highly recommend you thoroughly disinfect it before you put your snake on that if you're going to go down that route. But we also have this simple Sterilite tub I'm going to use just as to put the snake in, and I'm going to tear it out. Okay, so I haven't weighed them. I don't know exactly what they weigh, so can we get a drum roll? Okay, we're just tearing it out. I'm going to weigh in grams. Okay, so the snake is in the tub, and we'll get her to hold still. Okay, so she is 992 grams, okay? So this is, I believe this will be the largest animal that I'm going to weigh today. 1-year-old female, Barranquilla Columbia, 992 grams, just shy of 1 kilo. Next up, we have her future boyfriend, a male Barranquilla Columbia boa. This guy's also 2 years old. He's maybe not quite as long as she is. I'm going to guess he's probably like 100 grams or so less heavy, so maybe like just south of 900 grams would be my guess. But let's put him on the scale and see what he weighs. Okay, so he weighs 767 grams. So he's about 200 grams less than the female. And these animals have been fed pretty much an identical feeding regimen. I feed them about every 10 days to 14 days. And right now they're actually eating small to medium-sized rats. So even though I keep the feeding regimens the same as far as the frequency, obviously I up the size of the rodent as the animals grow. So of course you want a rodent that leaves a barely visible bulge. So for an animal this size, it's like a small to medium rat. As you'll see, some of my other boas we're going to weigh, they're not up to, you know, that size of rodent yet because they're still too small. But, you know, as they grow, I'll bump them up in rodent size to give them a rodent or even a small bird that leaves a barely visible bulge. Next, we're going to weigh some true redtails. And as I mentioned, the true redtails grow in general slower than the common boas. This is a 2-year-old true redtail from Peru, Peruvian true redtail born here. And in the sake of disclosure, this one isn't quite 2 years old. My Barranquillas were born in May of 2020. This animal was born in September of 2020, so she's not quite 2 years old. But you can see, I would say she's maybe 3.5 feet, you know, noticeably less plump than the Barranquilla. And the true redtails definitely have this more muscular look to them. So it's also the difference based on the type of boa. You can see how tightly she's holding on. So we're going to try to give her a weigh-in. Okay, she's in the scale. And she weighs 532 grams. Okay, so this female is about 200 grams less than the male Barranquilla and about 400 grams less than the female Barranquilla. But you can see she's in great shape for a 2-year-old Peruvian true redtail. Not at all worried about her size. She's right now eating large mice and small rats. And, you know, maybe by the end of this year she'll be up to medium-sized rats. Next up, we have a male holdback Peruvian redtail from the same litter, also born back in September of 2020. And I'd say he's roughly the same size as the female, maybe a little smaller. But let me get a weight on him. He's going to hold still. So he weighs in at 472 grams. Okay, so a little bit smaller than the female. But again, right what you would expect for a 2-year-old, or, you know, not quite 2-year-old Peruvian true redtail boa. Also on large jumbo mice or small rats. For the next boas to weigh, we'll stay with the redtails, but we'll move to the Suriname true redtails. And this is a male, also born in September of 2020. You can see how much smaller he is than the Peruvians and how tiny he looks compared to the Barranquilla Columbia boas. And in fact, when this litter was born, they were all really kind of small. You know, I compared them to my Peruvian boas that were born around the same time, and it was amazing just how much bigger the Peruvians were at birth. And actually, I've done some comparison videos just showing the sizes of these two litters and the holdbacks, so check those out if you want. But I would say he's maybe not quite 3 feet long and quite a bit more slender than the Peruvians, that's for sure. But still has kind of that muscular look. So we'll just zero out the scale here. And we'll get a weight on him. Okay, and he is coming in at a mere 217 grams. Okay, so he's about a quarter of the size as my Barranquilla female that's around the same age. So pretty amazing. You know, of course, I don't expect he's always going to stay a quarter the size. He's just growing slower, but when they're adults, they'll probably be about the same size. I mean, maybe the female Barranquilla will be a little bit bigger, but I would expect this guy to get to be about, you know, anywhere from 5 to 7 feet most likely. The Barranquilla female might be a little bit bigger, but we'll just have to see. In here we have a female holdback litter mate from the same Suriname litter as the male, but you can see she's quite a bit bigger. She was bigger at birth, and she's just grown a little bit faster perhaps, but we'll get a weight on her. Okay, so she's 237 grams, so a little bit bigger than the male Suriname, but still quite a bit smaller than the Peruvian redtails and the Barranquilla Colombia boas. I have one more locality boa 2-year-old pair to show you, and we're going to end with a dwarf boa. This is a Crawl Cay dwarf boa, and so another pair of holdbacks from 2020. And you can see how much smaller this little guy is. He's maybe a little over 2 feet. They're just so cute, these animals. Beautiful gray colors, and just love the size, and it's all the greatness about a boa constrictor in a more manageable pint-sized package. And in fact, the father of this animal, he's about 8 or 9 years old, and he's maybe 4 feet long. The mother's a little bit bigger. She's maybe 5.5 feet, but the father's real small. So I would think that this guy isn't going to get much bigger than around 4 feet. But we'll give him a weigh-in. Okay, and so interestingly, he's 275 grams. So this 2-year-old Crawl Cay dwarf boa is actually bigger than my 2-year-old Surinames. And again, the Surinames, they just grow slow. The Crawl Cay boas are technically a common boa, boa imperator, so it's not surprising that they're growing maybe a little bit faster. But of course, this guy I don't expect to get very large when he's an adult, maybe around the 4-foot range. Now we're going to weigh a female from that 2020 Crawl Cay litter. You can see this girl is about the same size as the male. Nice little dwarf boa. Incidentally, these guys, the adults are pretty mellow. These guys could be a little bit snappy, at least this one. So sometimes she'll strike out at me. Her body's getting a little bit tense, which tells you that maybe she's a little bit on edge. So I'm just going to hold her away from my face and my appendages so that I don't lose any blood, as much as that might appeal to the ratings of this YouTube channel. So we're going to put her in the weigh boat here and see what she weighs. Okay, so pretty close to the male. She is 258 grams. So a little bit bigger than the male Suriname, a little bit around the same size as the female Suriname. So again, these Crawl Cay boas are just growing a little faster. But of course, they're not going to get bigger than the Surinames. So anyway, I hope this video was helpful. I just wanted you guys to see how big these boas are at 2 years. So hopefully, if you've got some sub-adult boas that you've been growing up and you have some questions about their size, maybe this might allay some of your fears and concerns. You just want them to have slow, steady growth. If they're not growing, you might want to increase the food somewhat, just so they put on around 6 to 18 inches a year. And don't worry what everyone else tells you. There's all kinds of opinions out there. You don't want to feed them too much, but you don't want to feed them not enough. It's just all boils down to common sense. And so I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you liked looking at these boas. As always, shoot me any questions or comments you have. Thanks for watching, and enjoy your boas.